How can companies avoid getting stuck in endless AI pilots, achieve clear ROI from AI projects, and ensure responsible implementation? To explore these questions, we're joined by Ashley Gross, an AI expert known for delivering measurable outcomes like generating millions in revenue growth through targeted AI strategies. Ashley is the founder of AI Workforce Alliance and a seasoned guide to businesses aiming for practical AI adoption. Ashley, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Before we dig into some of those topics, can you share your journey? The journey from early marketing roles to becoming an advisor to enterprises on AI adoption?
Absolutely. So back in 2020, I found out I was going to be a mom, and it was really exciting. And I also found out pretty immediately that I was not going to be getting a maternity leave, which was not planned. And so, being a marketer for 10 years, I knew there were no tools in my tech stack that enabled me to consolidate my work week. And I really needed a tool to help me take 40 hours worth of work and condense it down to 15 hours without sacrificing output or quality. And so I started exploring generative AI tools to help me do just that. And from 2020, I would say, to like middle of 2021, I was just heads down building AI enabled workflows. So I basically took everything a marketer does and I had this AI first approach of, if it's a process that I have to do more than twice, I'm going to find out how to automate it. If it's preventing me from focusing on strategic work, I'm going to figure out how to automate it, and just had the same principle over and over again. And I told everyone in my organization what I was doing, and it reached the CMO, and she was like, "We know you're working 15 hours, but you're completing 40 hours worth of work. How are you doing this? Let's explore this." And so she gave me the opportunity to roll out AI and form a task force in marketing and then sales and eventually product. And we overachieved our revenue target by $25 million. So once I was able to go from an individual contributor and user of generative AI to actually implementing it into an organization and tying the impact to revenue, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do anything else. So I went back and got my degree in computer science, and I learned how to code, but only after seeing that ROI and really being able to communicate it in a way that was meaningful for people and got them back to doing the tasks that they loved doing and starting to automate some of the things that they hated doing.
Hmm. Tell me about AI Workforce Alliance. What do you
Yeah.
do and who do you do it for?
So we are an agency and we implement AI solutions. So this is everything from an AI roadmap with a strategy to actually building the solutions and enabling teams on how to use them. And we do this for enterprises. So everything from optimizing generative AI tools in your tech stack to actually vetting the tools that you need, building automations, and then building agentic workflows. We do all of it.
Cool. Your journey started by kind of solving your own problems. Many enterprise and SMB leaders struggle to identify what problems are truly suitable for AI. How do you guide leaders to pinpoint the right problem that AI can solve?
So I always get them to focus on what is the problem the business is facing this quarter, because everybody likes to get siloed into their own departments and focus on their department and their teams and not the overall business. So I get everybody to align on what is the biggest business problem that they are facing. Is it slow sales cycles? Is it lack of insight into the customer journey? Identifying one problem. And then we go back to a departmental level and say, okay, if the problem is slow sales cycles, how can we achieve a solution within the marketing team, within product, within sales that will bubble up to solving that problem? And that's how we identify the AI proof of concepts and use cases that we want to start experimenting with, because everybody already has this domain expertise for how to solve certain problems in organizations. It's more so AI helps you by enhancing the process and getting you there quicker. But you still have to have that domain expertise and that general knowledge before you apply AI to it.
Hmm. And starting with a problem, obviously, the best way to get started. You've also stressed the importance of aligning initiatives with clear business outcomes. Do you have a framework or steps that you recommend to ensure this alignment?
Yeah, I would say as far as a framework goes for aligning it, it should always be focused on the business. And so what I mean by that is, what is the problem? How are ways that we can solve this? How are we going to actually solve this? So like what does a task force looks like? Who are the subject matter experts that should be a part of experimentation for these specific projects? And how are their findings getting communicated outwards? So I would say find the pain, align the folks who are going to solve for that pain and build these proof of concepts. And then I would say have a way of measuring what the results are going to be, preferably for proof of concepts before you start to scale them out into pilots and out into the rest of the organization. I would say focus on quantitative metrics, but like aligning everybody on this is how we're going to talk about the outcomes and we're going to talk about them in this way so that everyone starts to understand what the ROI is and then also like how fast it is taking them to see any ROI if they can. And then I would say just iterate, like over and over and over again, iterate. So set a timer for 30 minutes in a working group. Try to solve one problem with one tool. If you start to see, a light at the end of the tunnel in 30 minutes, you're probably on the right track and you probably have enough tools and guidance and communication that you're going to have a breakthrough soon. If not, go back to the building blocks and iterate. Do you need more communication? Do you need more guardrails, more resources? Is this the AI tool that's supposed to solve this problem? And if it is and it's not, maybe it's not the one for your organization.
You mentioned subject matter expert. What's a subject matter expert in the context of a business looking to solve a problem?
Sure. Specifically with AI, we always hear the phrases like human in the loop. And so subject matter experts in this context are the people that are actually in the trenches of these workflows. Because if you're trying to automate something or augment something with AI, you need to know the people that are actually doing these pre-AI. You need to ideally have a video mapped out of their process for where are they going when they do this specific set of tasks. What is the narration? So why are they doing what they're doing in these specific areas? Like what is their thinking and rationalization? That's process documentation. You have to have that in order to safely guardrail experimentation and in order to enable the rest of the team to look at here was the process pre-AI, here's the process post-AI. So that's subject matter experts, the people that are actually doing the work.
And when you work with businesses, you mentioned having a task force. There are subject matter experts. Who else should be involved in a process like this?
Honestly, the short answer is everybody. But when I look at a task force, I like to divvy it up by working groups. And this varies depending on the organization, but just cherry picking an example. Let's say we have 5 working groups and they're focused on the strategy, activation, getting things up off the ground, the user experience, content, and then let's just say the last one is experience, right? If we were to bucket those working groups as such, it wouldn't necessarily make sense just to have sales or just to have product be in those working groups because how a process operates, for example, with an experience, you should have somebody from product in there because if we get insights from marketing on how a prospect is interacting with our product, the product team should know that pretty immediately before we win or lose that deal so that they can turn around and proactively start to make their pitches or their MVPs stronger. But my point is you should look at things holistically and look at them as if I were to bring in these specific groups of people from these different departments, not only would it help the department, but it would have this web that goes outward of only making everyone else's processes better in a way that is not siloed. So one person doesn't have to champion everything in AI within a whole entire organization because it's impossible.
Yeah. What about seniority? You mentioned the subject matter experts tend to be the ones, maybe should be the ones that have the problems, maybe more junior employees. But what does the rest of the task force look like? And what should senior involvement be in something like this?
Absolutely. So I would say it needs to be a top-down and bottom-up approach. And specifically what I mean by that is everybody in leadership should have budget. They should have time set aside. They should ideally have like resources, whether it's a Teams channel or a license for education for their employees. But like there should be something there. If this is a big priority for an organization, leadership should be screaming this from the rooftops, and not one employee in the company should be confused as to the stance of leadership. Because if you have certain members that are not mirroring the authority and the severity of the stance of taking on AI and enabling their organization to, that sends mixed signals down to the rest of the organization. And then I would say, as far as like who else is a part of these task forces, you might have your more junior members in these working groups, but you should also be having monthly or at least quarterly meetings with the people managers and the director levels, and then a quarterly meeting with your C-suite executive staff, because everybody needs to know not just like day to day what is happening in these working groups, but like what is the ROI, what is the outcome, how fast were we able to scale from a proof of concept to a pilot, and then have technical documentation created for the rest of the organization to learn how to do the same thing. Like there should be a clear trajectory and mapping, because what you're going to inevitably run into is when you're solving one or two problems, you're going to find other problems. That's just what happens by nature. And leadership needs to know when you find those, what is preventing innovation from happening? Like what is actually stifling innovation from happening, and delegating those asks out. Hey, we have a process that's taking too long in InfoSec. Leadership needs to know about that, not because they should, come around anyone and say like, we'll make that happen, like create a fast lane, but because they need to know what's possible as of today in their organization and what could be changed to create more opportunities.
Um, Speaking of like change, something like this requires cultural change. What strategies or practices do you recommend to help organizations build a culture that's receptive and adaptive to AI?
Yeah, so AI implementation should only be technical for me and my company. It's emotional for everyone else. And so a big piece of this is change management. And so the attitude that I have for whomever brings us in, usually it's CMO or CFO, I say, you want to see progress. And progress to you probably means that everybody has a license for this tool, everyone's using it, they're doing this, they're doing that. But in reality, the progress you should be focused on are when we come in and we start to move, are we moving the bulk of the group, or are we moving three players and everyone else is getting stuck behind and we're creating more silos? Because our goal is to bring everybody forward. And sometimes what that means is you go with what people are comfortable with. I never change someone's workflow. So when I get hired into an organization, if they give me a problem that they want a solution built for, I never change the workflow unless I absolutely have to. And what I mean by that is perhaps they bring me in to build an agentic solution. You can do anything and build it however you want. But I'm going to work with the environment they already have. So if they already have Microsoft and that's their ecosystem, I'm going to create the agent's front end so that they're just chatting with a teammate, because that's their usual workflow for whatever process I'm augmenting with AI. And at the end of the day, it's still an agent, but the front end and the experience that they go through is their exact workflow. So when they know that they're going with their same workflow that they're used to every day, but they're accomplishing so much more and they know the ROI of an agentic workflow, they're going to be more inclined to try it versus if I say, go into ChatGPT from now on, every single time you want to build a campaign brief, you have to build it in ChatGPT. I just threw their whole entire workflow off.
Yeah.
And nobody really thinks about those little things, but it really does matter, and it does add up when you're thinking about change management and the emotional implications that AI has.
It's interesting. Did you experience that in practice where initially maybe you like required them to change their workflows and you realized that that just creates friction and hurdles that lead to low adoption? And then when you went back to solving for something that works within their existing workflow, the adoption jumped up significantly?
100%. Yeah, I think that even the folks that are doing this every single day, it's still experimentation, and every single organization is different. A lot of the times, whenever I would see something like that happen, it would inevitably be because leadership wanted something, and the folks that were in the trenches of these workflows and responsible for producing the assets, that wasn't the way that they were used to working. And so it didn't make sense to kind of like jump attack and say like, we're going to come in and we're going to build this and it's going to do this. It didn't matter to them that it would save them hours of time, not manually performing research. They didn't know what to do because it's very hard to get people to augment their time if they don't know where they're spending their time in the first place. And so I think that a lot of the education that I bring to the table is teaching them how to focus on outcomes and like specifically giving them examples of quantitative and qualitative outcomes, because sometimes people have never learned how to communicate what outcomes look like to senior leaders. And then in reverse to senior leaders kind of saying, look, we are going to stand up these working groups, but we're going to phase them. And if you have these projects coming out or a brand refresh or these high priority initiatives, we're going to space this out so that when it comes time for those big initiatives to happen, they're not having to focus on AI being one more thing added to their plate. We are proactively like mitigating and cutting out time and spaces around the business and what is best for the business and like what does homeostasis look like for them.
I'd love to walk through an example of how you work to give people a sense for what this process looks like and what they can expect if they were to work with you. You mentioned work with a large marketing organization who was drowning, as you say. Tell me a little bit about that story.
Yeah.
Who had the problem, and what was it? What did they come to you with?
So they didn't even really know what the problem was. The ask originally came from a VP of marketing. They just knew that they didn't have insight into the customer journey. And so they brought me in, we did a discovery call, and they said, I think that our issue is XYZ. And we're bringing in all these marketing leads, but they're not converting into sales. And so I took a look, and it turned out that they had no insight into what their process looked like from like how they were creating the content and even choosing what to put their time and energy into as far as like a campaign goes, into like what actually converted them, who got onto their website, like what day, what specifically made them go onto their website, like all that information was missing. And so I went back to the team and I looked at their process, and I just spent a week shadowing them, and they were spending, 8 hours building a campaign brief and 5 hours performing competitive intelligence, and all this time spent planning and actually ideating before they even got a V1 off the ground, which was then just so many cooks in the kitchen. It was just being broken apart and piece by piece. And it was just this huge time sucking endeavor. And what we ended up finding was all we really needed to do was automate what was a campaign, like what did a campaign actually mean, and get those definitions from leadership, and automate the campaign brief process so that if there was a need or an ask from a senior leader for a campaign to be created, they had to fill out a form that justified that it was tied to an SI or a large KPI that the business had, and like what was the specific research or points that they felt were compelling enough to build this campaign, and automate that process so that by the time it got into the hands of marketers, they could easily say, okay, this is justified. We know that there was multiple eyes on this. We know there's a need for it. And then the next step was they sent it through an AI agent that performed all the competitive intelligence for them
Hmm.
and pulled 10 quotes from research analysts. So now they had their research, they had reputable quotes that backed up everything that they were going to say before they even created the actual assets. So just a lot more time spent automating processes, which were ultimately communication and stakeholder approval mapped out across different geographies, and then like expediting the rest of the process so that it could actually get to the folks that were writing the content, and they could spend the bulk of their time writing it, getting feedback. And that's exactly what happened. They ended up being able to have extra time to talk to the heads of product or engineering that they usually wouldn't get to because it had to get out the door so fast. But those certain perspectives from those seats, especially engineering, oftentimes are missed. And they are so valuable on different levels because you can only speak to everybody in a certain way that you're used to. But if you get different voices in there, then you've got a little bit of everything for everyone.
Hmm. So the before state was a lot of manual preparation,
Yes.
preparing the brief, researching the brief, and not a lot of time to actually, I guess, creatively think about like what it was,
Right.
because they ran out of time. The after state is those kind of research and preparation phases are automated, and so there's a bunch more time to, I guess, use their creativity to put together a compelling brief and win. Tell me a little bit about the kind of the
Yeah.
difference between the before and after in terms of time spent. How much time did they save by moving from a kind of manual to an automated process?
So, in order to actually take a campaign from ideation to live, it was 3 months pre AI. Post AI, it was 45 minutes
Hmm.
because of one agent and one automation tool. And I would also say, like, from a money perspective, beforehand, they didn't really have an understanding of like what was the ROI on a campaign level, not just like specific assets, social media, paid ads, but like how well did the campaign actually convert customers? Was it the tone? Was it the message? Was it the audience? Um, and afterwards, we were able to actually like track down the ROI in terms of revenue and see how much they were making on a campaign level. And like that was able to go into like predictive analytics for certain teams and like budget asks. And it just had this nice little domino effect that we could actually see like what was working in real time. And there was no opinions about it. It was just facts.
Hmm. Can you give people a sense for what automation looks like in this context?
Yeah,
Maybe what sort of processes were automated, and if there are tools that you use that you could share, what tools you use to
sure.
introduce that automation?
So this specific example, there was a Microsoft ecosystem. So every time, there was a sales win or a product, live or MVP created, it was all being stored in various SharePoint folders. And so the automation was used using Power Automate. And what it did was somebody filled out a form, which triggered this Power Automate automation. And then it would go through the SharePoint folders and it would find correlations. So if somebody asked for a campaign on a certain, competitor, it would go through the SharePoint folder and see like, okay, out of all the deals we won and out of all the deals we lost, how many did we lose to this competitor? Simultaneously, it is looking at like, what is all of the research that we have and what are all of the assets we've ever come out with that are live on our website that talk about this competitor. And it was just gathering all of this research and validating it. And then it was actually creating the V1 asset of whatever they wanted. So if it was an email copy, an ad, and a white paper and an infographic, it would create the text needed for all of those single assets. And then it would upload Jira tickets so that the teams could then take over from there. And it would go to creative, and creative would start to put their spin on it. Website would start to optimize. Maybe a short explainer video would start to be created. But that was the automation.
Hmm. And you mentioned also an agent doing research. Like, what did that
Yep.
look like?
Yeah, so this specific one again was using Azure. So I wanted to not change the workflow. And so I had an Azure agent um, basically be the front end of this so that as they were asking questions, think of it as like a co-pilot with a call transcript that you're looking for. So I had the front end be just an employee. So you would open up a Teams chat, you would click on this employee name that was actually an AI agent, and you would ask it questions and say like, do we have everything that we need to pitch this campaign with its brief and all of its assets to leadership? Do we have everything for this retro call that we're supposed to have? You could just ask it anything at all about this campaign or the research or anything that it already had information on, which is pretty much everything in an organization, and it would spit back answers to you.
Yeah. What's interesting about this example is they came to you with a problem, but it wasn't like an AI problem.
Yeah.
Did they think maybe that AI could be the solution, and then you all ended up building like both an automation driven and AI driven solution, or did they just come to you with a problem and then you went about determining how to solve it?
I would say the latter. So a lot of times when folks come to me, the problem that they come to me with is almost never the problem that we end up solving for. It's just the problem that they hear about. And so if you think about these little friction points, there were probably lots and lots of red flags along the way that the entry and junior and middle level managers were seeing before it bubbled up to being a slow sales cycle. But it wasn't until the sales cycle was stalled to a certain amount of time that it actually like triggered the attention of a senior, sales leader. So the initial problem that they came to me with was not for like AI to solve it. It was just, we know we have a problem. AI is a new technology and we don't have anybody that is trained to use these tools to help us solve these problems. Is this possible? And a lot of times I will say too, I think just with the overall lack of education in the market, there's whatever the current hype is, right now I believe it's GPTs based on all the questions I continue to get, but whatever the current hype is, that's what people kind of laser focus in on. And so I get lots of questions where it's like, can a GPT do this? And it's like, no, but an agent can, or no, but like an agent in combination with an agent, an automation can. So it's really just hearing their problems and knowing that you've applied different tools to their ecosystem and the tools that they're already using today to solve for that problem, and then being able to explain it in a way that's not technical that they understand.
Yeah. What's an engagement like this look like from a calendar perspective? From the
Sure.
moment they came to you with this problem that maybe wasn't the problem to you rolling out this automation and AI solution, what did that look like time-wise?
So my discovery calls are 45 minutes and there's prep beforehand. So after that discovery call, the proposal gets signed. If you come to me with a problem around data, like data hygiene, you don't know if you have clean data, you don't know if it's enriched properly, that's more of a 3 to 4 month contract because we are not only just auditing your tools to make sure that they're working, but we're also seeing how much technical debt you have and like whether or not you actually need to have it and trying to find better solutions that you might not already have in your tech stack today. And then we're actually building out the automations because if you don't take the time to audit your tech stack and make sure that one, it's doing the job it was intended to do, two, whatever you're paying for, you're optimizing and using every feature, and three, there's enough enablement around those tools apart from AI that people understand how to use them appropriately, there's no point in you adding an automation, let alone an agentic workflow, unless you're married to that tech stack. And so that's why we take the first 4 to 6 weeks to do that discovery work and map it out and make sure that everybody is on the same page before they add anything. Now, is that the best thing for us? Probably not, because we're helping everybody out. But the last thing I want is for someone to hire us. We fix something, we make them feel great, we leave, and everything breaks. I think there's a lot more enablement and education that's needed and documentation. And it's not a glamorous job, but I do think that it is a responsibility for anyone that's going to consult in this industry.
Yeah. And what does your relationship look like with clients post implementation of a solution like this? Do you tend to stay on and advise them and help them kind of roll it out to the organization? I imagine there's some kind of iteration there too. What does that kind of post, I guess, pilot like
Yeah.
relationship look like?
Yeah, so we have not had one contract not get extended to this date. So we are currently in 15 enterprise organizations. We maintain the solutions because ultimately what it gets to is there's foundational levels. We optimize the tools in your tech stack, we optimize the AI components of them, we build automations to connect them, and then we build agents to run those automations to connect your tech stack. And so we do this in a really nice way that by the time the workflows are built and the agents are deployed, you want us to maintain them because you realize that it would be an entirely different beast for somebody in your organization to have their 9 to 5 job and maintain automations and or agentic workflows on top of that. It's just easier. And also when you're dealing with enterprises, you have to have a really high level of cybersecurity clearance and knowledge on GDPR in the EU. And it is a lot of muscle memory and work. But when you have those kinds of specialties and expertise, you are very valued. And I think that our clients appreciate that about us. They can just kind of lean on us for any questions and navigate this without feeling like the world is ending every time the EU posts another rule.
Right, right. Solution wise and tool wise, my understanding is you've evaluated hundreds of AI applications. How do you go about vetting and choosing the right ones? I guess part of it may be that you don't want to disrupt a workflow, and so there are tools that are specific to certain environments. But yeah, tell me a little bit about that process.
Sure, you nailed it. So a lot of it is I don't want to disrupt the tools that they already have. And so if they tell me that they love their CRM and their CRM is HubSpot, I will probably try to pitch them Agent AI because it was created by the same exact founder of HubSpot. So the similarities, the user experience, the visuals, they match really, really well. So I know from like an onboarding and enablement perspective, it's going to go over a lot well. I always try to meet them where they're at with their tools, but also I have really, really high standards for the tools that I bring to them because I don't want them to just be the tool of the moment. I want them to last for years and continue to evolve to meet their needs, not just today or tomorrow, but years from now. And so I hold very, very high two different aspects. And one of them is no third party integrations. They need to connect directly. I don't want to create another problem. I don't care how shiny the AI tool is. If it does not connect directly to the tech stack, it's not worth my time, in my opinion. And then I would say the second part of that is I need to know that at any point in time, whatever tools we bring in, where is my client's data at rest and in transit? And at any point in time, if they decide that they don't want this AI tool, can they click a button and it's severed? Everything is severed. The data is theirs. It doesn't leave their ecosystem. Those are really the two aspects that I focus on when I'm vetting tools.
Yeah, I guess a build on that related to building versus buying.
Mhm.
How do you think about that? And maybe you spoke to it with respect to data. Um, but there are hundreds, thousands of AI startups. There are hundreds of agentic startups, and there's a lot of building going on of custom solutions, whether they are GPTs or, much bigger projects. How do you think about that kind of build versus buy decision when it comes to AI?
I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an and because there's lots of organizations that already have machine learning engineers and, even sometimes like fully built out AI teams within their organization that are coding and building. It's more so just where is their time being focused? It's probably embedding AI into the products that they're selling that are a part of their company. And they don't want to use their resources to necessarily like be optimizing productivity workflows. But there is ROI in that and in doing that. It's just not necessarily their area of expertise. They might not know how to communicate to marketing and sales and product in non-technical ways because they don't have to in their day-to-day. And I think that that's where I say that's when you actually should bring someone in to build solutions for you based on the workflows of your non-technical audience and folks who can teach them and communicate to them in ways that actually mean something to their workflow. And then when it comes to like, do we bring someone in to build versus like buying a tool? In my opinion, I have looked at a lot of these tools. I think that we're getting to a point where there's a lot of wrapper tools, I like to call them, where it's just a front end that is built, but the back end is probably OpenAI.
Mhm.
And that's fine if it solves a problem that needed solved, but I am seeing a lot more tools being built every single day than I am real life problems being solved with these tools.
Hmm.
So I think that's more so what it is.
When it comes to your work, we touched on a marketing example. Where do you find most of the richest kind of problems to solve within an organization? Is it in marketing? Is it in product? Is it in supply chain? Across all the conversations you have and the
Mhm.
enterprises you're working with, where are the kind of the biggest problems to solve today?
I would say across every single department, process documentation is a huge one, but it needs to live in every organization. Like, how does your team do what they do every day? Do you have that documented anywhere? If your team left you tomorrow, would you even know what to do if they left? So, process documentation on a larger scale. I would also say communicating in general. I think just like centralizing knowledge sharing and not having it siloed to the most senior folks in your organization that know how to do things just because they've been there the longest. So, like, in return, we're like, congratulations, you've been here for 10 years. You're going to answer every question that someone has about this process because you know it so well. So, process documentation, knowledge sharing. And then I would also just say on a larger scale, like the tasks that people hate. It sounds silly, but truly, like if every single person just focused on making a list of 5 tasks that they really hated doing and then finding solutions to automate or at least augment those tasks, you will see that pay off 10x in your workforce because when they're happier doing their work, it's going to return to your clients. Your clients are going to return that love back to your brand reputation. It just continues to cycle and pay off. And I've seen it over and over again, but just focusing on tasks that prevent folks from being the best versions of themselves, especially people leaders, like what are the tasks that prevent you from being the best leader you can be so that you can retain your employees longer and have a better culture? That's where I would focus my time.
What a great place to end. Ashley, I really appreciate you coming by, just curious and sharing perspectives and learnings from all your work at AI Workforce Alliance.
Thank you for having me.